Good Wednesday morning. Thanks so much for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Michelle Beck. Let's get to your headlines. Happening this morning, the man accused of driving his BMW drunk into a packed patio at Park Tavern in St. Louis Park is expected to change his plea to guilty. Stephen Bailey is accused of driving into the patio, killing 2 people and hurting a dozen more. Prosecutors just added new charges last week after identifying more victims. Now a look from the Vatican this morning, where the focus is now turning to electing a new leader of the Catholic Church. Today, more than 130 Catholic cardinals will come together to begin the conclave. The centuries-old process is shrouded in secrecy, and the public will only know a new pope has been elected when white smoke pours from the Sistine Chapel chimney. Jay Gray is at the Vatican with details.
Well, good morning. It has been 16 days since the passing of Pope Francis. In that time, we've seen world leaders and dignitaries gather for his funeral here, pilgrims traveling to Rome to honor his service and his legacy. And now the cardinals come together here at the Vatican to decide who among them will take his place. As the conclave begins, there's a sense this could mark an historic turning point for the Catholic faith.
Pope Francis really set Catholicism on a new course. Are we going to maintain that course, or are we going to retrench somehow?
If there is any division behind the locked doors of the Sistine Chapel, it will likely center on whether the Church continues and even expands progressive reforms initiated by Francis, or, as some conservative cardinals have suggested, returns to the more rigid roles, traditions, and doctrines that defined Catholicism for centuries.
Are we going to have a pope who gets up and says, Francis was a disaster, we need to go back to the old church? I don't think that's going to happen.
Vatican watchers say the new pope must be someone who, like Francis, can bridge the gap between factions within the church.
What Pope Francis did in emphasizing mercy, in terms of emphasizing meeting people where they are, listening to what is needed among the people of God, that defies labels of traditional versus progressive.
Those who will vote say any labels or leanings will not play a role in their decision.
We support whoever is the best person. We don't know. So, but we don't choose a pope based on continent, based on race, based on language. We choose a pope that is truly can be the successor of St. Peter. Yeah, the one who can look after the whole world.
As the whole world now waits to see who they choose. This conclave will be the largest and most diverse in the history of the Catholic Church. A vast majority of the cardinals, 108, have never taken part in this process, but that will change in just a few hours when they take their oath and cast their first ballots. At the Vatican, I'm Jay Gray. Back to you now.
Right now, a Minneapolis firefighter is in the hospital after a fire broke out overnight. The chief told us crews responded to a fire at the former bar and music venue Whiskey Junction on Cedar Avenue around 12:30 this morning. When they arrived, the fire had reached the roof. A firefighter was treated for possible overexertion and is at the hospital for evaluation. Investigators are now trying to figure out what caused that fire. This morning, the community is mourning a 14-year-old boy who was shot and killed in the heart of downtown Minneapolis Monday night after a fight broke out among teenagers. Police Chief Brian O'Hara says this is the result of teenagers having access to guns, which can lead to deadly violence, an issue local groups say will take everyone to tackle together. Our Raya Katene spoke with groups in the city working to curb youth violence.
The day after a 14-year-old boy was shot and killed in downtown Minneapolis.
It's been a very, very difficult week for the community.
The work continues at this outreach center, providing resources for young people and helping them stay out of trouble. In fact, Tamara Stark says the work here never stops.
It's an amazing space.
Operating under the nonprofit Tubman, the North Star Outreach Center serves young people ages 10 to 24. Here they find a list of resources and services too long to list out. Services so needed that the center is expanding into more space next door. Among them, a safe space for young people to hang out, basic supplies and clothing, help with schoolwork or careers, and honest conversations about violence prevention.
Youth 24 and under are more at risk of facing all types of violence. A lot of people think youth don't care about this issue, but they do. They care. They don't want their friends dying. They don't want their family members harmed. And they're looking for ways to prevent it.
Councilmember Michael Rainville, who represents downtown Minneapolis, says preventing youth and gun violence starts at home, and parents play the biggest role.
City councils can only do so much. And, gun is a federal issue. I would hope that our state, they have been considering having locks, mandatory locks, trigger locks. That would be a good start. But at the end of the day, it's the people using the guns that are the problem. Let's just work together and make sure that we love our children enough to keep them safe.
And for young people who may not always have a place to go home to, those at the center hope to be that home for anyone who needs one.
We want it to feel like a really safe place where everyone belongs.
Developing right now, U.S. trade officials are getting ready for major talks with China set for this weekend. Top U.S. and Chinese trade officials will discuss tariffs in Switzerland starting Friday. It's not clear if the countries have negotiated at all on tariffs. Right now, the U.S. has up to 145% tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the country. That's forcing businesses that deal with China to cut back on orders. The first ships with goods from China that are facing the new tariffs are just arriving in the U.S., and some of them are half full. That could lead to product shortages and layoffs for dock and warehouse workers.
In June, we're seeing 13 canceled sailings, and there's still probably more to come. So if there's no trade deal in place, and looming will be the July 8th deadline on the 90-day reprieve for all other countries outside of China, Canada, and Mexico, cargo volume may stay light for a while.
So in return, China has placed 125% tariffs on U.S. goods coming into their country, meaning some of the biggest exports from the U.S., like agricultural products, are being ordered less. Meantime, today, the Federal Reserve is meeting to discuss the current state of the economy. Chairman Jerome Powell has been pressured by President Donald Trump to cut interest rates, but analysts believe the central bank is likely to hold its benchmark lending rate steady to guard against further inflation. New this morning, the Trump administration has shut down a CDC committee. The Healthcare Infection Control Practices Advisory Committee was responsible for issuing guidance about preventing the spread of infections in healthcare facilities. The committee crafted national standards for hand washing, mask wearing, and isolating sick patients that most U.S. hospitals follow. Switching gears now to a brand new report released overnight by the Minnesota Department of Education. It shows graduation rates hit a record high last year. Looking at the data, 84.2% of last year's seniors earned diplomas, with more than 58,000 students graduating. Gains were seen across all major student groups, including American Indian, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and white students. The same goes for English learners and students with special needs. The report also shows the achievement gap is narrowing. Overnight, a law requiring real IDs went into effect. It's one of 3 options you'll now need to fly or to enter federal buildings. But as of this morning, there are thousands of Minnesotans who still don't have one, and that may cause slowdowns at the airport. Audrey Russo has a closer look at the numbers.
I reached out to state public safety officials who confirmed to me that only 42% of Minnesotans are Real ID compliant as of today, the deadline. Now, federal officials say that about 81% of air travelers are compliant, so Minnesota is lagging behind a little bit. But if you thought today was going to be full of travelers getting turned away from their vacations, you better think again. Federal officials have clarified within the last 24 hours that people without a Real ID, passport, or other federally recognized document will still be allowed to board their plane. You will, however, be subject to extra security screenings.
I would make sure that you give yourself sufficient time. You're going to encounter a TSA representative or an airline or an airport representative. They will give you direction, but we will process. You will not be turned away.
So say you're inspired to run out and get Real ID compliant with that law that's been on the books for about 2 decades. How long is it going to take before you get that document in hand? Well, state public safety officials tell me that the current wait time is about 55 days, so that's July 1st at the earliest. Back to you.
This morning, the Golden State Warriors are waking up with a series lead in their playoff run against the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves just could not get the ball in the hoop. They led in the first quarter but missed 8 straight to open the second, and it was downhill from there. Anthony Edwards scored just 1 point in the first half. He turned it on in the second, but it wasn't just good enough. Wolves fall 88-99. Game 2 is Thursday night in Minneapolis. Hoping for a better start to the playoffs for the Minnesota Frost, the PWHL defending champs are in Toronto for Game 1 tonight. They posted this video on their social media from the Coca-Cola Coliseum. Puck drop is at 6 p.m. Game 2 is Friday. Then they'll be back at the X for Game 3 on Sunday. Stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.